I love the look of weathered and well-worn airplanes. And one of the cheapest and easiest ways to add scratches and chips on an airplane is with pencils. Or so I was told. You see, the first time I used a pencil, I went hog wild. I pecked all around the model. I applied massive chips at random locations. My airplane ended up looking like it caught measles, and, well, I didn't like my pencils. But I kept seeing great models with pencil chipping, so I was inspired to try again. And now, I really like my pencils. Let me show you how I did it. Chipping is so hot right now. Never before in the entire history of Model Kind have there been more products, techniques, philosophies, studies, and of course, opinions on paint chipping on scale models. I'm not kidding. Just look at this stuff. It's mind-boggling. There's extreme chipping. There's light chipping, heavy chipping, medium-sized chipping. There's Eastern Front chipping, Western Front chipping, and you better believe there's Pacific War chipping. There's even chipping on top of chipping. Chipping, 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 chipping. But the results speak for themselves, am I right? Adding paint wear and chipping is a great way to add a lot of character and age to your model. The thing is, aircraft paint doesn't chip like armor or cars, or playground equipment does. First of all, the paints and the metals are different, and how and where the airplane gets worn is also different. Prop wash and unprepared landing strips are likely to lead to chips and dings on the leading edge of wings and gear doors. Pilots and maintenance people are more likely to scuff and scratch an airplane, as well as to add a lot of dirt on it. But these things don't take chunks of paint off an airplane, certainly not all over it. Of course, there are exceptions to that general observation. So, how do we replicate this? Well, you can go the hairspray or chipping fluid route, but those are designed to work with one thin layer of acrylic paint. So if you're using multiple layers of paint or any other kind of paint, this technique may not work. You could add the scratches and chips with paint using a teeny brush or with a sponge. This is effective, especially for adding a lot of small chips quickly, but it does take some practice to get it just right. This time, I'm going to go with pencils. They're cheap, they're widely available, and most importantly, you can place exactly the right amount of chipping or scratching exactly where you want it. Now, the reasons why my first Prisma pencil attempt failed is because, well, I didn't practice, but more importantly, I didn't work with a photo reference. So, let's take a look at some of these well-loved planes and see how pencils can be effective in replicating small chips and scratches. Well-used airplanes will get scratched up, especially where pilots and maintenance crew access things. But as you can see, these are not chipped like swamp-bound derelict tanks or construction equipment. A nice, clear photograph is great at showing the relative size of the chips and their shapes, as well as their locations. Now, some of these shots are showing obvious wear, but sometimes paint scratching can be more subtle. More often than not, the paint is scuffed, scratched, rubbed down. Sometimes we see this in familiar or regular patterns on certain airplanes. But rarely it's a uniform, massive chipping across the entire airplane. Of course, those planes do exist, but there are usually specific circumstances for missing huge chunks of paint. And there are always exceptions or unique situations, so it is best to hunt down a picture and really study it before you break out your pencils. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using pencils on a 48 scale Airacobra, and this is a great picture. Take a look at the wing root and compare it to the rest of the plane. While the paint is fading in the sun, the paint isn't chipped all over. You can clearly see the wear on the walkway, and the paint seems to have worn off in spots with chipping, scratches, and scrapes on the edges. In this shot, it's a bit harder to see, but again, there's a lot of wear on the wing walk and the painted areas right beside the wing walk. Scratches, dings, and chips can be seen from the trailing edge, but as you move up along the wing, the wear is less and less. What I wanted to do was wear away at the black painted wing strips and maybe get down to the base coat in some areas, down to the primer in others, and down to the bare metal where the wear patterns are at their most intense. I started by sharpening the pencils, and I practiced on a mule before committing to the model. Now, as you can see, this is a combination of light taps to build up an area of wear, then filling in some parts where the wear was down to the metal. I was trying to replicate the wear pattern from the photograph, but I was working only one area at a time. The neat thing about pencil is that you can peck and tap light scratches, and then you can slide it in areas to replicate where the paint has chipped right off. I also used 3 colors of AK pencils to simulate the base color, the primer, and the worn anti-slip coating. Now, the technique is to be light and patient. The sharper the pencil and the lighter the touch, the smaller the scratches, and the more effective the result. So, I used a light pecking technique, but it's just much easier to show you. The look I was after was not about paint flying off in chunks. Rather, it was about capturing the look of paint as it was rubbed and scuffed and down to a point where it gradually wore off. I used a green pencil to replicate primer, just poking through here and there. I was careful to not go overboard on this, but where it's got a little too heavy, it was simple enough to go over it again with the silver color. I used a gray colored pencil to make it look like the scuffs on the wing walks, and I tried to do these as lightly as possible. But these were really scuffed up in the picture, so I kind of went along with it. I switched areas on the wing root and started in with the silver again. I noticed there seemed to be less and less wear as you headed from the back of the wing forwards. I then started to work in the khaki color to replicate scuffed olive drab, or where the wing walks were completely worn off the plane but not scratched down to the metal. I then finished with really wearing down the paint in several areas along the panel lines, taking care to not have clear edges of wear, but have it work together with all the scuffs. And this is where I ended up. And here is the other side, and you can compare it to the picture I was working with. The last thing I did was to tone things down and further blend with some Pacific Dust pigment. I used a soft brush. I just used a small bit of it, but I used a soft brush to gently work this in and make it look like it had been walked on for months. And here's a final shot of the model with the chipped and worn walkway. So my advice is to sharpen up those pencils, find yourself a few good photo references to work from, and to practice on an old model or a paint mule to get comfortable with your technique. Lastly, just work a small section at a time. I hope you liked the video. Let me know if you like to apply scratches and chipping. Do you use a pencil or do you use some other method? Which one do you prefer? Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time, keep building and keep taking risks with your build.